All right, guys, I'm going to share some tips here on how to find your own fish when you're out in an area that has other boats fishing there or is crowded during the weekend, whatever. You're going to run into situations that there's just going to be boats around. And I'm going to go through a scenario that happened to me a few weeks ago and talk about how we ended up getting away from the fleet and finding some fish of our own. So I made the run from Newport Beach out to San Clemente Island with my buddy Jimmy Decker and his son Briggs a few weeks ago. And we knew there was fish down off the east end of Clemente, but we'd heard that there had been some fish seen on the front side of the island in the afternoon. So rather than the previous days, so rather than run right down to the area where they'd been biting, we shot for about halfway up Clemente, and the line we took allowed us to cross over the edge of the mackerel bank. If you see my cursor here, this is the mackerel bank. Running the edge, we stopped and glassed up towards the mackerel bank, looking for signs of life, bait, other things like that. Didn't really see a lot, so we slid into Clemente. Now, Clemente drops off pretty fast, so a lot of times you'll see tuna surprisingly close to the island. And over the last few years, most of the bluefin we've been seeing have been riding along the 500 fathom curve, which is about 3,000 feet of water. It varies a bit. That it's a good standard thing there. And that's basically where the flat bottom starts to come up towards the island. Mid-island, it's about 2.5 miles off the island. And I found that if you run along that fathom curve, and what I mean by that is you can see how it drops off quickly. These close lines means it's a steep drop off. It starts to flatten out, and then we have flat ocean basically here outside of this. If you run along the edge of the contour lines, you can glass in and out and cover everything for about 5 miles within the 5 miles of the island. So when we arrived, we didn't see any bait, we didn't see any birds, we didn't see any current breaks, water temperature changes, color breaks, nothing. It was just generic plain ocean. So we decided to run down along the 500 fathom curve and see if we could find something between there and the east end. This arrow kind of represents a straight line of where we're running. You don't have to hug the contour line because you can see pretty far in the lee of the island. And you're looking for birds, bait, signs of fish, things like that. We really didn't find anything until we got off the east end of the island and we found the entire San Diego fleet piled up here. There was everything from full-day boats to overnight boats, day-and-a-half boats, long-range boats, probably 20, 25 sport boats, and I'd say at least 50 or 60 skiffs sitting in about a mile or two square area, but basically in a basic line. As we got down that way, we still weren't seeing anything. And what I'll do a lot of times if I get into a situation where I see a bunch of boats fishing, and guys that know what they're doing, obviously, like the sport boats, and I'm not seeing any sign of fish, I'm going to drive down to where they are and glass them, see if they got fish hanging, look if I see fish on the surface, look if I see birds, look at what I see. So as I ran down, I had a blank screen the whole way down on my meter. As I got about a quarter mile from the fleet, I started marking bait. And that was the only bait I'd seen at all morning. So I knew that, hey, these guys are in this depth of water, which happens to be right along the 500 fathom curve, and there's bait where they're catching fish. And we didn't even really need to drive through the fleet. We just drove past them and started looking to the outside of them. And just because you see a bunch of boats balled up in one area, the boats on each outside edge, but they're not on the last fish that are there. Those fish aren't like a school that's a circle, like the circle I made here. These fish are spread out, they're moving. And what I found that morning was they're moving along the 500 fathom curve again on the east end of the island. So I had a couple of choices on what to do here. Once I got outside of the fleet, you can see how this 500 fathom curve runs out a bit. I ran out a bit, but once I ran out this way, I got out of the bait. So no more bait out this way. That kind of precluded me from running down the back of the island, which would be the natural progression of following this curve because, hey, I'm already out of the bait here. So if there's bait here and no bait here, the next logical choice would be to look to the other side. And while the topography on the other side of the ridge, this is the Kalani Ridge right here, looks very different than what we're seeing here, um, there's still a 500 fathom curve running there. So I ran out towards that. And as I ran towards that, I started seeing signs of fish on the surface and breezers up and down real fast. And the further I get away from the fleet, the more fish I saw. Started seeing bait fish, and fish coming up and feeding on them, birds and stuff like that. And as we ran out that way, we found tuna on the lower end of that zone. We caught one or two, and then we followed them up the 500 fathom curve here. Just below the island, we caught a few more, and then they went down. My friend Jonathan, who was up above, said he saw some fish. We ran out further, and we found tuna in the exact same area that they'd been seen the afternoon before, and now this is late morning. We left the fish up high and dry and biting. But basically, we were able to avoid the entire fleet, have fish to ourselves, and my buddy Jonathan also caught fish in the same zone. We kind of worked together. But basically what we did was we just followed the contour line. And we started out looking where the fleet was, looking what the depth was, looking what the contour and the chart was, seeing what signs were around where they were, which in this case was bait fish, the only area with bait. And we tried to look for that bait in similar depth away from the fleet, and we found it in the lee of the island as opposed to on the weather side. And I think, if I remember correctly, the water was a little bit cooler the further out we went as well. It was 63.7 on the inside. I think it was 62 or so on the backside. And I think those fish were staying in that warmer water. That bait was staying in that warmer water. And as the uphill current pushed throughout the day, those fish moved towards the west as they've done the day before. So that's just one way of looking at something. I know not everything's staying from the island, but anywhere you go, there's going to be contour lines. There's going to be bait on the meter or fish on the meter, and you can make some decisions based on what you're seeing that can give you a good guess as to where to go to catch fish without having to deal with the nausea of fishing in the fleet.